diapo o no?
Sí, ara veig la diapo.
L'he hagut de posar amb un PowerPoint. Bueno,
Ja t'ho he dit, sí, perquè depèn de quins documents. Si no comparteixes, o sigui, si ho fas compartir document, ha de ser PowerPoint. Si no, has de fer compartir pantalla.
Bueno, lo que hay.
Bueno,
hello everybody. Today we have two talks with Ana Fajula and Sarah Vinyals. They are professors at UAB. Well, Sarah will be professor in a few weeks. Well, they are young professors and they are going to talk about a couple of experience in publishing articles. And they are going to share their knowledge about all the process. So maybe this can be really helpful to you if you want to publish in the near future. Ana, quan vulguis. Merci.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon. How do you do? Are you fine?
Yes, we are fine.
Okay, okay, I'm happy. Okay, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Ana Fajula, as David has said. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Advertising, Public Relations and Audiovisual Communication here at the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. Also, I'm a member of two research groups, one of them Public Radio, and the other one is the research group Study and Research Center in Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation, both of them at the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. And as our coordinator has said today, with my colleague Sarah, that I think that Sarah is here. So, Sarah, welcome.
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Sarah. I'm going to talk about the process of publishing. Okay, so I'm going to try to share with you one file. So please let me search it. Okay.
Maybe David should.
Okay. Can you let me know if you are seeing my screen, please?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes? Okay, perfect. Okay. So we are going to start. Before I forget it, at the end of the talk, me or David or anyone else is going to post in the chat the list of attendees, okay? Okay, right. So let's start. I would like to point out that this is going to be an informal talk about the process of publish an academic article, okay? And I'm going to focus on one example that you are seeing on your screen. That's the case of the last article that I have published with 4 colleagues more this year, okay, in March 2021. So it's really very recently. In the journal Media and Communication. Okay, so I would like to start saying that maybe when you try when you are thinking, okay, about publish an article, most of the times we don't know how to start. No? So we can question, how can we start? I mean, one question you might have is, where do I start? Which journal best fits for my research, the research that I'm doing? So first, we have to see which journal is the most suitable for the profile of our article. And to do this, I think that we can start, for example, by taking a look to the database that you are seeing on the screen. In Estimago, I don't know if you know this database, you can find a rank of the most important academic journals all over the world. And as you can see, you can filter them, the journals, by areas, by categories, by countries, and years. And I think that's really a good point to start, okay? And from here, you can access the journal's website, for example, and see what their next issues will be, or if they have a call for abstracts or special issues, or also the deadlines in each case. And it's very important because it's something that you must remember and keep in mind. Deadlines will be really, really very important, a red line when you are trying to publish an article, okay? So what are the next steps? Once you have decided which journal you want to publish your article in, my first advice would be, what are you going to see on your screen? Be patient, okay? The process is going to be a little bit long and it's not going to be easy, so keep calm. You have to think that from the moment that you send the abstract or your first proposal of the manuscript of the article until its publication, more or less, the process takes approximately 1 year, okay? So you must keep it in mind. It's not easy, it's not fast, but of course, it's possible, okay? Okay, my talk is going to be positive, okay? So, okay, and now we are going to see which is my advice for a step by step, okay? So once you have choose the journal, the first thing that you need to look at is the instructions for authors. That's very important. Why? Because there you can find how submissions should be submitted. Usually you are going to see that all nowadays must be online with the need to register on the platform. That's the normal way. Which type of manuscripts they accept, for example, articles or review or book review or editorials or something like that. The maximum number of words that they are allowed, that's very important because it's really important for your work and what you can write and not. You must be really very simple when you are going to write, you are going to see it. And a style of reference, normally in APA style, and for example, how to deliver the tables and figures, if inside the full text, in a supplementary file, or both styles. And also it's important to know if the journal, for example, has processing charges once your article has been accepted. Okay, it's important. For example, in our case, the journal is with open access, and this total amount of the processing charges was 900 euros. So really is, okay, it's a considerable amount, okay? Okay, and now what was the publication process in our case? You are going to see with this example. Okay, I'm going to start for the beginning. We were working on a research project on female stereotypes in radio advertising, and we saw that the journal Media and Communication had a call for abstracts for the thematic issue. It was really a special issue, called Gender and Media, Recent Trends in Theory, Methodology, and Research Subjects. So as you can see, really the main thematic of this issue was gender and media, and what really was very fits so well with our research. Okay, so we prepared the abstract and submit it, and after a few days, really few days, more or less, I don't remember, but maybe a week, we received a mail from the editor saying that our abstract had been accepted for considering its publication in the journal. Okay, and it's important to note that this is not a guarantee of anything, as they can accept the abstract and then reject the publication, but at least you have passed the first phase, and that's why this first step is really important, because if your abstract or your first proposal of article isn't accepted, you have no options, okay? And you are going to fail, of course. So when the abstract was accepted, then we were required to deliver the article within a set time frame, okay, with a deadline submission. And that's why I said at the beginning of my talk that it's very important to keep it in mind, because you must be really very serious with this deadline, okay? And you have to accomplish the time, okay? And also, we were required to follow the journal's template file. Okay, you must think that this journal in particular works with the Word template file that you have to use. Okay, what's something important that you have to remember too? Before submitting an article, you must be sure that all the reference about you, or I mean about the authors, about your research group, your affiliation, has been deleted from the text, okay? And also you must delete the hidden information of the article. That's called the metadata, okay? Because the manuscript must be completely blind, or if not, sure it will be rejected, okay? And once submitted, we receive an email stating that the manuscript had passed the first review, the first screening that you are seeing in the screen, that we understood that they were checking the compliance with formal elements. Okay, that's very important too. And that it had been sent for peer review. So here you must wait. Okay, there's no way. You have to wait and wait for the answer. Here we were also asked for a list with the names of 5 potential reviewers, without this implying that they were the ones who were going to review our article, okay? But the reviewers had to meet certain requirements, for example, to have a PhD, not to belong to the same university of us, and not to have published anything jointly with us in the last 5 years, okay? And what about the outcome? Okay, the outcome of the peer review process arrived, and the result was that one reviewer, the first one, accepted the publication with revisions, and the other one rejected the publication. So the article was sent to a third reviewer to finalize the decision. Do you understand? To decide, okay? And fortunately, the third reviewer accepted the publication with revisions. So we receive an email with the result of the decision and with the comments and revisions that the reviewers asked for. And here came really the scare, and as there were a lot of changes to be made in a very short time. It was, I promise that it was really awful. Okay, one question. What do you think? How many pages with comments and revisions do you think that we received? 1, 2, 3, 4? What do you think? 3? No. 10, okay, right. 10, we received 10 pages of comments and suggestions for changes. Okay, I'm going to, here you can see some of the comments that we received. And the comments and suggestions was really very so specific and concern all sections: methodology, introduction, results, conclusions. And it was really a nightmare. I think that really was the worst part of the process, because there was a lot of changes to do, and really in a week. I think that more or less it was a week, okay? And in addition, that was not enough. In addition, we were asked not only to submit the article with the changes, but also to attach a cover letter where we have to reply point by point to all the reviewers' recommendations and respective rebuttal in the case we disagree with any suggestion. Okay, so we had to explain the changes we had made and those we had not, and argue why. Also, to be able to better address the reviewers' comments, the word limit for the revised article can be extended, in our case, from 6,000 words up to 8,000 words in length, okay, including the title, the abstract, and all the reference list. Okay, which was our next step? Our next step was that, of course, we say we have arrived here, so we have to finish. We make the changes, and it was really very important for us because this journal is what is called a Q1. Okay, so that's the best type of journals that you can publish an article. So it's really a great effort, and we thought that we had to make all our best in order to publish here. Okay, so we make the changes and deliver the revised article into the deadline, and we receive another email in which the academic editors, in this case, not the reviewers, but academic editors, ask for further changes. So the nightmare has not finished yet. As in the case of the reviewers' comments, we had to submit the revised article and a cover letter replying to the editor's comments. Okay, again. So again, we make the changes and submit the revised article. And finally, we received the email saying that the article had been accepted. so it was really very, very good news for us. But when you think that you have finished, you have not finished yet, because on 2 subsequent occasions, we were asked to revise the article before publication, what is called the final proofreading. Okay, so you have to take a look to the spell, to something, to the elements like that. Okay, formal elements. And finally, we were asked also to deliver the tables, the figures, in our case in EPS format, the author's information and our photos, and to provide also the professional information about the translator or the proofreader of our manuscript in order to ensure the quality of the text. That's something that's very important for the journal, okay, especially when English or wherever the language in which you are writing is not your mother tongue, okay? And so that's when, more or less a year later of that, we began all this way, the article saw the light of the day, okay? And at the end, also we received a survey that was sent by academic editors in order to evaluate the whole process, okay, that we have lived. And I think that that's all that I wanted to explain. I think that, I don't know if I have talked so fast, because I talk so fast, I know, but please, if you have any question, please post it in the chat and I will answer them with pleasure, okay? So that's all. Thank you very much.
Merci, Anna.
A tu, David. If you have any question, mainly about all, really about all, about the introduction, about the methodology. They wanted to be more clear, more specific, really about more specific and more clear about how you write. I think that one of the main problems is because when English is not your mother tongue, you have a way to think, okay? I don't know if you understand me. And when you try to to think in English is really very difficult. So we have a way to think and a way to write that in English is different. English is more short, is more direct language, okay? And we tend to make it more difficult, I think. And the comments was mainly about that, about be more specific, please. Methodology is really very important. You must explain perfectly how have you done your research. It's very important, and where the data came from, and how have you done your research, and something like that. Okay, and also it's very important that your reference must be updated. Very important. See, they don't want that you talk about reference or books from the 60s or the 70s. Okay, your reference must be the most updated that you can. Sí, sí, Santiago, Clara, muchas gracias. Espero que sí, porque el inglés no soy nativa, ¿eh? Pero bueno, he hecho lo que he podido. What did you learn with this experience? I learned that really publish is really difficult. You must work very hard, and you must have a very your mind very clear. I don't know, very organized. Okay, you must be so organized, and you have to work hard, and you have to work every day, because if not, you are not going to finish the article or the manuscript. Okay, and you have to, and first of all, you must think that before you start writing, there are a lot of hours looking for information, looking, organizing, and trying to mix it on your mind, and really to have it clear in order to explain it clearly. Okay, that's what I have learned. Okay, I'm going to read what Nivea is saying. You mentioned I have two questions. Okay, Nivea. First question. In my case, I'm member of Publi Radio because I'm one of the members of that we founded the group. So that's why we start working. We join together professors from the department that we work about different research lines. In my case, creativity, as David Roca, that he was in this group too at the beginning, and we start working together. Okay, and in the second case, in the Study and Research Center in Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation, really one professor contacted with me in order to participate in this group. Okay, so was by direct contact. And part of the research, how are planned within the group. Really, we are always working in research. Okay, we have a database, and we are always trying to make some research about that. Okay, in the areas of creativity, of sound, of social responsibility, and okay, we are ever working. ¿Sí? Ah, Nivea, te podía contestar en castellano, hija mía. Sí, Nivea, a ver, es que estamos siempre, o sea, ¿cómo nos organizamos? Pues bueno, básicamente estamos, es eso, ¿no? Estamos constantemente trabajando y lo que hacemos es distribución de tareas, ¿vale? O sea, también esto es muy importante, ¿vale? La distribución de tareas, o sea, que una parte del grupo haga una cosa, otros miembros del grupo hagan otras y puedas juntar los esfuerzos, ¿ok? So in English, I'm going to repeat it in English. It's important that if you are 4 or 5, for example, 2 or 3 can be working in one research line and the other members of the group in another research line, and then you can join your efforts, and instead of one article, you can have 2 articles. You understand? Okay. At what stage of writing the paper would you recommend to decide the journal? As soon as you can, because it's important. You have to think that your article may be rejected. Okay, so you have to be planned. You have to be options. So you have to think that in our case, media and communication was our first option because of the time, because really we had the chance that when we take a look to the deadline, it fits for us. It was really easy for us to write the article, but we look to journal more, okay? Because if this journal rejected our article, to have the option to send our, in this case, not our abstract, because there was not a call for abstracts, but of course, a proposal of manuscript to the other ones. So as soon as you can, this would be my recommendation. Thanks to you. It's a pity, really a pity not to be able to see you face by face, because the screen is really uncomfortable for me, but that's what we have. Okay, I don't know if you have more questions. If not, I think that David now is going to introduce my colleague, Sarah.
One second before that. Anna, could you explain, I don't know, one of the comments that the peers gave you? So the students can understand that what kind of comments you can get from a peer.
Kind of comments. Okay, if you want, I'm going to try to look some example.
Perfect.
One moment, okay. I'm searching. One moment, please. Okay, okay. Okay, for example, okay, David has said if I could put an example about the, okay, one moment, please. Okay. About the type of comments that we receive. Okay, so for example, one comment was, what is meant by traditional women in your third research question? What does this look like? An example, no? Be more specific. Another one about methodology, what I was saying before. Okay, that's very important to explain absolutely all about your method. Okay. How did you select the radio ads? From what period? What was your sampling strategy? What was your total sample number, for example? Okay, about our pie charts. They say also that, for example, one of the tables had a lot of information and it was very hard to read, for example. And they suggest that maybe another type of graph, maybe a bar chart, might take the data more digestible, for example. What else? Review, really the reviewer one, the comments of the reviewer one, I think that was what we consider a normal way, okay, more or less 1 page. But reviewer number 3 really was really awful because he was taking a look phrase by phrase of the text. It was really really awful. For example, okay. One example of what I'm saying, okay? Reviewer number 3 said, line 130, okay, line by line, okay? A mixed methodology, quantitative and qualitative, was proposed to develop the research and exploit the data, but it's not clear what is qualitative in a study that uses only predetermined categories, okay? So it was really, really very specific comments. What else? About, for example, one really positive comments also. No, I really enjoyed this paper and its focus, as well as its more conversational writing style, particularly in the introduction section. I see a lot of potential value in its contribution to the field. However, the paper would benefit greatly from the authors crafting a clear argument for that contribution to the field, as well as from a more structured argument in the literature review and methods or results sections, okay? And when they make some suggestions in the abstract, that they say that it was too general or too general or bad. More that I have not talked about the abstract, and really it's more important. You have to think that in some cases when you send the abstract is the first impression about your article, about your research. Okay, so it's very important that the abstract must be so attractive. It must be clear. It must be talk about your research, talk about the main goals of your manuscript, what is this going to add to the research in the field, and it's very important because you have to explain all of that in only 200,000 words in normal, okay? So the abstract is really very important. You have to think that's the first, it's like your first sight, okay? And it's very important to be clear, to be specific, to talk about this, about the goals, why it is going to be important for the field, and something like that, okay? And I don't know if you want that I explain something else. Your research questions also has to be so clear, so specific, and not to be answered with directional questions, yes or no. They don't like something like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. You have to be clear and to have the chance to explain. Okay, it's really important. And I don't know what else can explain.
So how long did it take you to publish the article from the beginning?
1 year, more or less 1 year. And you have to think that there was like a break because of the pandemic, because the article has to be published, I think that in January, more or less. But because of the pandemic, they said that we had more time in order to write our article, because they understand that the situation was really a little bit difficult and it was strange to work in this context. And they said that we had more or less, I think that two more months, I think. But since we start the abstract and send it till the publication, I think that 11 months, more or less 1 year.
And how many weeks did you give me? Did they give you for the changes Do they
For
give you like
changes?
15? Yeah.
Really very few. I think that no more 10 days. Really very few. It was really stressful, awful. It was awful. I think that the worst part of the process that I remember, because I have suffered it, but really suffer, it has been the changes. The changes, really, really awful.
Okay.
10 days. I think that 10 days, no more than 12. No more than 12. And it was for vacations. It was on Christmas holidays, I remember. So,
Wow.
so worst.
So great. Thank you very much, Ana. Muchas
Okay,
gracias.
thank you. Thank you all. Best wishes
So,
for you. And regards.
cuida't, records els nens, el Pere.
Molt records.
Ciao. So now Sarah, it's a professor at UPF, but she's going to join us in the next weeks as a professor at UAB. And now she's going to talk about her experience. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Hello, David. Hello, everybody, actually. Nice afternoon. And thank you, Anna, for the, I was in the way of writing in the chat, but I was already talking. So thanks, Anna, for your presentation. I think we complement each other very well because she actually explained the process of publishing, which is really, as she said, it's a very tricky process. You need to take a deep breath and be patient, as she said. So it was great. And now my presentation, I'm going to focus also on a paper of mine, which emerged from my thesis, but it's not my PhD thesis, but it's not the core goal of my thesis. I will explain later on, which I think it will address some issues that I found on the way of publishing and on doing the actual research that go right before what Anna just explained. So I hope you find it useful and that I can give you some insights and I don't know, some hints or some insights that could make your lives easier, or think of things that often we forget or we don't think that time to do them or to think about them, etc. For that, well, David already introduced me. I am currently at UPF, but shortly I'll be joining Universitat Autónoma. And my area of research is mainly branding, brand image, brand personality, and how brands interact with consumers. And within this major area of study, field of study, my thesis was addressed place brands, which are basically brands brands applied to territories. That is either a city, a country, a town, etc. Let me share my screen. While I try to share my screen, because that's my first experience in Teams, so I think I can manage. I would like to ask if any of you is working also in branding things, if your thesis is related to the branding area. Maybe you can post it on the chat. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, Sarah, yes.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I see Nivea, Aureo, Paulina. Okay, great. Brand personality. I like it very much. So in this case, you will get more the feeling of my thesis or the research. Nation branding even. Okay, good, interesting, very interesting. I'm excited about it. So I hope that not only the findings or the challenges that they address, but also the topic may be useful for at least for some of you. Okay, I'm gonna try to use can you see my laser point there? In case I have to note something.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna specifically talk about this paper that you see here, European urban destinations attractors at the frontier between competitiveness and a unique destination image, which is a benchmark study of communication practices. Okay, as I told you, it is a paper that it emerged from my thesis, but it was not the core goal of my thesis. And I wanted to talk about this paper because one first comment that I would like to, or learning that I had during my PhD years, was that a thesis is not the same as a paper. Okay, so first learning, don't think of an article, if whenever you are facing the challenge of writing an article, as if it was your thesis. With your thesis, we expect, or by doing the thesis, we expect mastery on a broader topic. But on an article, journals want specific, concrete, consistent proof of a single thing. So everything on your literature review needs to be very consistent and I would say compact. Okay, you cannot talk about very dispersed things. You talk about only those things that are highly relevant for this specific research, and the same with your discussion and conclusions. You cannot talk very deep about things that are related or somehow. No, you need to talk about those things that are specifically and directly related to that part of the research. Okay, so to start talking about this paper, first of all, I need to put it in context within my area of study, within my PhD, within my thesis, which was entitled Building Urban Destinations in Europe. So my sample was limited to European cities. I'm sure Paulina can relate to that, since she's working in nation branding, sorry. And it was not only a project that aimed to describe the cities, but it was tackling or reconceptualizing the relationship between two big, highly relevant constructs, which were brand image and brand personality. And here is where I meet you, Aurel. So that was the broad topic. In my research, basically, what I wanted to figure out is how a city destination or city that aimed to attract tourists went from just having the Tour Eiffel, for example, or Sagrada Familia in case of Barcelona, and becoming such meaningful experiences for travelers that were looking on these experiences on the city of Barcelona or on the city of Paris, meanings beyond the pure old-fashioned traditional touristic experience. I brought you here some examples of memes that I'm sure you came across many times about how meaningful traveling is, that traveling is not only about seeing sights, but it is about transformation. It makes who you are and says something about yourself. Okay, so these kind of memes that you find are actually indicators that destinations, or in my case, cities in particular, became much more than just a container of the architecture that you can find in it, and become brands. So the way they communicate and the way these cities live in the mind of these potential tourists or consumers, they act like brands. So, oh, sorry. Why place brands? Why are they important? So even though I'll talk about destination and tourism, my core interest was in branding itself. Okay, so of course addressing tourism matters, but from a branding perspective. So as I was telling, in this symbolic consumption era that we are now, where we are really, our lifestyle is full of consumption practices, we feel represented by some brands that we acquire, etc. Territories became part of this consumption behavior. In this symbolic consumption era, territories are not just mere contingents or containers of attractions, but the place itself becomes a good to be consumed, becomes this brand. Okay, so the attractive things that were relevant for me to frame this project was that the attractiveness of a destination was not only a set of attractions, but it was a more a global idea or a more abstract idea in the tourist and consumer's mind, that this strong image could significantly influence, or working as a brand from the branding perspective, these cities could strongly influence tourists' attitude and intention to travel, which at the end it has an impact for the society within that. It's good for the economy, for the business, for the territory itself, and that it is basically creating this brand image was basically a challenge of communication. It is communication that was in charge of creating these worlds of meanings that are particular from branding. Okay, and within this domain, I studied in particular the official websites as a representative of everything that this brand was in consumers' minds. I see that David just posted the link to the attendee list. Okay, so if meanwhile while I talk, you can also access and check your attendance. So what is relevant from place brand image? First of all, I was doing research about projected brand image, which is the efforts that the destinations put to promote these desired brand associations to influence consumers' minds. So usually we say that brand image is actually what stays in your mind, what stays in consumers' mind after a several set of inputs. Okay, so the projected brand image is what, the effort that communication experts would put in order to place these ideas on consumers' mind, which is highly important because we are talking about public finances. We're talking about, the public management. So all the resources that are invested in creating this image and finally placing these associations in consumer minds come from the pocket of each of the citizens of a territory. Okay, so it must be unique, consistent across impacts, otherwise it loses potential. And to position positive associations in tourist minds came with the sum of functional and symbolic messages. What is this? And that was highly important to understand where the point where I stopped talking about my thesis and I start focusing about that particular paper. So understanding brand image as these functional associations together with these symbolic ones, and combining them, we would have, or the hypothesis and my previous research is that with the sum of these two key ideas, we would get to a strong brand capable of moving the consumers or the tourists in that case. So on one side, I had the functional dimension, and on the other side, the symbolic dimension. Two elements that lived together in the brand, but they were really different in nature. So on the symbolic dimension, my study was my focus was on brand personality, which is related to this self-expressive function of the brand. So the character that a brand would have, which you'll see that it's not something that is not tangible. Okay, but I will not talk about this today. But on the other side, and there was this functional dimension that was supposed to be the one that was specific, concrete, and very clear, much more than this personality that was a little bit more strange or ephemeral, which I studied through the attractions. So associations related to the offer of the destination. So as I said, architecture, the gastronomy, packages, transportation, all these things that if I think, or to put it differently, if you think of Coca-Cola, functional associations would be, for example, that it's bubbly, or that it's, it has these tiny mini cans, which are very practical to just have a shorter or smaller drink, that you don't need the big bottle only. So usually functional associations are those that we can rationalize about, that we can understand, more tangible. So think about the product, about the packaging, about pricing, about the usage of that product, etc. Of course, when we apply this to place brands or to city brands in this case, it gets more complicated because it's not a single product, but it's a union of many different products and different companies, let's say, or different companies that provide different things within that brand and territory. So things that were important, really important and crucial about this functional association. First of all, that brands usually they start projecting these functional associations. So even though probably you've heard about brand personality and how relevant it is, for a new brand or a brand that is not very well known, the best strategy is to start working with this one, with this side. So functional that are more tangible. Sorry. And as they grow, they progressively they move towards more symbolic and self-expressive ones. So first of all, these functional associations appear to be mandatory, which is related to the second comment that, well, no, that the third comment actually, that these functional attributes have been shown to be very relevant for very relevant brand image associations linked to competitiveness. And this concept of competitiveness is what triggered my paper. Why? And of course, the third key point is that, as I told you, place brands are more complex than any commercial brand. So these attractions, the notion of attraction, is not as straightforward as one would think with a commercial brand. Okay, but what does it mean that these attractions or these ideas are linked to competitiveness? So many papers that I studied were talking about these lists of attractions that were necessary for brands to compete, for place brands or city brands to compete within the market of tourism. So my first question to move forward with my research was, okay, what type of attractions do cities possess? What are their main claims or things that are capable of to move you to Barcelona, for example, to study the PhD, for instance? So would we have it's about the parks that the city has, is about them attracting or having museums and showing the contemporary art, or is it the fact that a city or a city brand is capable of putting together packages and particular offers, another attraction that would make that city competitive? Well, here was I doing my PhD, and I had really a hard time. You know, probably you've already noticed that doing the PhD is full of ups and downs, moments where you think that everything goes wind forward, and some other times where you are really struggling. Well, that was one of them. Why? Because I was starting to look for lists of attractions. What things should I take into account when doing my research? And I found here, I brought you, for example, 9 papers, among many others, that were addressing the topic. We're talking about how these attractions were capable or were needed to make destinations competitive. Here, in the first, the oldest, former one by Egner and Ricci, they highlighted 16 different attractions. In another one, I found 9 different attractions. Then 15, then 10, then 11, then 23, then 32. So each paper was actually saying or providing a different list. Each paper was talking about different stories. Some of them met, for example, accommodation was something that was quite common among them, but some others were unique for specific studies. So how could I address my research if each paper that I explored to do my research was talking about a different story? That was a real problem. So I really struggled delimiting the categories. So whenever you, and of course, imagine yourself, what I could have done is like, okay, I take this one that is the more thorough, that it contains the last one, 34 categories. Great. I arrived the day of my defense, and I would have understand if the board of my defense told me, why did you use 34 items if the most recent research just pointed, which is from 2015, just pointed 32? Or if that particular research, this one, for example, was only based on a theoretical basis, or this one was only based on one single case, on a single case study. So there's a lot of fear when deciding which list to address. So if you ever find this situation or similar challenge like me, first of my recommendation would be, first of all, doubt yourself, because you are starting, there's a lot being researched, And probably you read very little yet. You need to read more. You need to keep going. But if you keep pursuing that, keep finding not only one single paper, but 3, 4, and 9 papers that still support this stress or this anxiety that you are developing because there's no unity or unified criteria, then that was my my recommendation here. Keep your eyes open, because if that challenge persists, maybe it is because there's a research opportunity. Maybe it's not because you haven't read enough, is that nobody addressed that issue. And maybe those people, researchers here, had the same challenge as you. So here is where my paper was born. So my first, all this introduction is, first of all, to understand that your thesis is a broad topic, okay? And within your thesis, you'll face challenges, you'll face different subtopics that they might have the potential to become a paper within it. So keep your eyes open while doing the research. Okay, so I found a research opportunity to be published. So from there on, my question was, to what extent are these attractions, which I don't know how many, but they exist, so to what extent these attractions are serving as a competitive sign, as a competitive sign, or as a key brand image asset capable of differentiating the brand? Because I was working on brand image, which its core definition entails the power of differentiating the brand from the other ones. And all the previous papers were always talking about competitiveness, which is basically pointing to those aspects that a destination must have in order to compete in that market. So I noticed that among these papers, okay, Paula, 1 second, I'm going to go there. Among these papers, they were talking about brand image, elements that were part of the brand image, but most of them were talking about competitive. So what is serving as a must-have and what is serving as a differentiating trait of the destination? I see that Paulina had a question. Maybe I can solve it later. It's okay. That way I forward. I see it's a long question, but let's talk about it later, Paulina. So here starts my the paper, the core topic of my paper. So these European urban destinations, attractors at the frontier, at the boundaries between this competitiveness or destination image. So let's start working on that paper and take all the juice I can from it. So, and here my most prominent recommendation is always to be systematic. Be systematic, find a reason or an argument or a way of doing things that you can explain, and explain everything, to gather your sample, to do your analysis, to every step of your research. Find the criteria and follow that criteria. It will make your lives easier later on when these 10 pages of review that Anna was talking about, they come. If you've been systematic, your life would be much easier because you will have a criteria to follow to make each of your decisions. Okay, so to start this paper, there was no universal list of categories. I could state that, even though confirming that or stating that is scary. As I told you, I know very little. I'm just starting, and saying that nobody did this, it's quite scary. So first of all, as I told you, you should doubt yourself, keep reading, and if that challenge still persists, that may be a sign that it's worth keep studying it. So because each paper of those that I explored provide a different list of categories, the problem was clear. For the record, I was systematic on proving that, trying to prove that. So I went to my databases and I used the same keywords to explain or to look for all the papers that contained destination urban brands or destination branding plus attractions, which was my interest. So all the papers that were published with these 2 keywords were examined. I had a criterion to state that. First way to be systematic. Then they were also adapted. Another thing that's pointed to the interest of that topic is that they were adapted. These different lists were adjusted to single case studies, which made it difficult to replicate to other type of brands or studies. Only minor, some of them were used in comparative studies. So with those insights and this evidence, I thought that my outcome would allow, putting together these lists and finding the common traits between studies would allow me to, and future research, to comparative studies with a more reliable list of attractors that could be applied to different cases. First step, what did I do? I collected all these papers, this literature review that I did in a systematic way. I emphasize that. I collected it in my list is a kind of grounded theory. I grouped according to the topic. I grouped different, several research, used different labels, but in fact they were describing the same things. So I grouped them together and I found out kind of the common traits that were present in more than one single study. So that was another way of being systematic. When processing all these data and finding my variables, my key categories, okay, first of all, I had several criteria that I followed. I said, okay, I will only include that trait if it's present in more than one study, because that means that it's relevant, that it's not isolated, applied to that case. I would group labels that are actually referring to the same thing, etc., etc. Okay, so I had my list of criteria. That a recommendation would be to try to write it down while you're doing, because it's easy to forget about these things. Okay, so first step was to limit this list of reliable and generalizable categories based on previous literature. Be thorough, okay, keywords and providing, here I said that I was thorough in the way that I used the same keywords, and I analyzed all the papers that not only had these keywords, but they're also provided as a textual list of attractions, because some of them were omitting the list, okay? And be systematic. Clear criteria to gather and group these different categories. And I must say, not to disappoint, because I know Anna was very optimistic, kept this nice way, optimistic, positive view of publishing, but the paper was not interested at all about this figure, even though I was so proud of it, and it took me a lot of effort. He was not interested about that. He was interested in knowing that I actually did that, but not to be published, okay? So there's a lot of work that you'll do, or you'll have to do, that at the end, unfortunately, won't be on your paper, but you must do it if you want to be on the paper, okay? But still, the outcome was valuable. They found it valuable. So future research will have a more solid basis to root their research on destination branding and also about competitiveness. Second step was to test whether these categories have this differentiated value that I was telling. Are they either a sign of competitive, or are these attractors finding or have a role to differentiate the different destinations, the different brands? So for that, here you have the list of brands that I analyzed, the website, the content. So there were 12 cities. I analyzed 779 pages and a lot of content units, which is a story for another day. And I tested 19 categories that we saw in the previous page. I explored and I coded all the content according to these 19 categories. Of course, I conducted a pilot with the coders because that was based on content analysis. Sorry, I'm not sure if I mentioned it. And I had this kappa coefficient, which is really important for a journal to show that the coding process was reliable. So in this second stage, I did that coding in NVivo, which is one of many softwares that you can use. from these 19 categories, I found out that only 10 of these categories were actually meaningful within the particular context of city brands. Maybe for other destinations are relevant, but for city brands, only 10 of them were relevant and had representation among the website. And I was honest on the paper on stating what can I prove with my research. Of course, I was not doing research with consumers or potential tourists. The only thing I could prove is what the destinations were actually communicating. So this honesty, even though initially you may think it's less relevant or it's only partial, it would be nicer to state a bigger claim that you achieved a bigger thing. My recommendation would be to be honest, even if it's a smaller contribution or more limited contribution, it's probably more reliable, because with a single research, it's very difficult that you will fix the world, but you can fix tinier things. So being honest on a paper on what you can actually achieve is something that makes the research believable. That's all my opinion, okay? We can also contrast that with Anna's experience and other researchers on the room. Well, that was my coding process. So the second step was actually testing on it. And finally, proving or showing how these different attractions which role were they playing, either competitiveness or distinguishing brand image. And here is where I use correspondence analysis. Okay, statistics is great, especially if you are publishing or doing research in the area of strategic communication, management, branding, etc. But I must say that statistics is not the goal, is the means. Okay, because sometimes we lose sight and statistics may be very challenging and we place it as the result, but not, it's only the way to show the result. So correspondence analysis, for those who are not familiar with it, is a representation technique that shows that the maximum variance between variables. So in a two-axis plot, you'll clearly see if I were to compare the cities according to two variables, whether they have more accommodation or whether they have more leisure activities. You know that in a two-axis plot, you would place the cities in a two-dimensional space. But here I had 10 different variables. So instead of a two-dimensional place, I had a 10-dimensional plot, which the human mind cannot process, but fortunately the computer can. And what correspondence analysis does is take this 10-dimensional plot and take a snapshot, okay, or a shot from that perspective that shows the biggest difference between variables. So that can explain to you, okay, between all those things that you are telling me, the biggest source of difference is delimited by this and that variable. And that's what we can see here. Let me see. For example, in dimension 1, which is this axis, I see that the biggest source of difference was here. You see a tiny a. So that was accommodation, and leisure. So in axis, in dimension 1, accommodation cities talking about accommodation and leisure were highly different from those talking about, on the other side, local culture and history, for example. So that was the first source of the differentiation. Second one was the dimension 2, which is the difference. So the second source of differentiation between the cities was those projecting local culture and history compared or contrasting with those projecting, you cannot see here, but it is architecture and heritage. So some cities were highly emphasizing on their heritage and architecture. Some others were emphasizing on their history, and those were very distinguishing traits. And here's where I want to highlight that statistics is not the goal. So I'm trying to move faster now. Okay, but it's important because all the papers that I've seen so far, they had this beautiful plot, which is one single plot explaining that two-dimensional frame. But correspondence analysis actually gives you several possible plots. They have 10 dimensions. So he keeps taking images, or he keeps making these plots until he explains the full difference of the full difference between the variables. So that's just to get an idea. I know you probably not understand completely, but it's to get the feeling of it. So the first dimension was capable to explain 30% of the differentiation. When I added the second layer, the second dimension of the plot, I was able to explain with these two dimensions, I was able to explain up to 57% of the differentiation between the cities. But by adding, which is still, it is good because I know where the main source of differentiation comes from. But by adding a third one, I was reaching almost a 75%. I was explaining almost 75% of this differentiation between the cities and the variables. So if I had understood statistics as the goal, I would have stayed here. But because I had to learn this on the way, and I really put an effort to understand what was I doing, I saw that it is important if I can understand by adding a third dimension, even if it's more difficult and it doesn't look that nice on the paper, I would explain 75% of the differentiation. So here was my second plot. And actually, which was a third dimension that was explaining that cities were also differentiating between them, between those who were projecting or talking a lot about the lifestyle of the city, contrasting with those who were emphasizing more about architecture and heritage. And that was highly valuable, a highly valuable outcome. And actually reviewers found that very interesting, that I was not afraid to add the third dimension, even though it was not common. But for the purpose of my paper, it was relevant because I wanted to find a maximum source of differentiation. So basically, don't lose focus. Keep in mind your goals, even when you're doing statistics and it takes a lot of effort. Remember what your goal was, what are you trying to explain, okay, which is really important. And finally, find a suitable journal, which Anna already talked very much about it. I will just add some aspect that I thought may be relevant. Important things to consider, of course, impact factor, what Anna said, that if it's a Q1 or a Q2, these things are relevant. For example, to find in the journal. But not only that, for example, my topic, my focus is on branding, but I was addressing tourist destinations. So my topic was halfway between two subject areas. So I was very careful that even though journals, the journals I published were indexed or were from the tourism subject area, they were also part of the management area, which was my interest. Also, the peer review process and the timings, as she said, there are some journals that are really saturated and it takes 1 year or even longer. Some others, they clearly state that they ask for the reviewers to take a single month, for example. So that is something you can take into account. How saturated the journal is. You'll see that some journals, they have published already until 2022. So they have online first papers from 2022, which we are not there yet. So that's an indicator that maybe they will be slow and they will be very picky because they have a lot of publications online. Open access is really important. Anna told you about this. It's really important because that is more options to be seen. You want your research to be influential. You want other people to read your work and to take over your findings and keep, you know, the research progressing. And also fees and other requirements are some things that you need to take, because fees can get really expensive. So it's something to take into account really in the process. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy if you have questions. I remember that, Paulina, you had one question. So while the rest of you may think of it, Paulina was asking, didn't it cost you to apply brand theory to place brands in your thesis? I will tell you about it because of my transformation. That concepts such as brand, image, or brand image have had, yes. All these concepts have migrated from functionality to emotional. The destination brand is simpler, but in the case of countries, more difficult because the country is not a product. Destination brand, it's true. The destination brand is more limited because it competes within the tourism market. Instead, a country competes in the tourism market, competes to attract talent, competes to favor exportations and importations, for example. So countries compete in really different markets. So it makes the challenge even more difficult, but they are very similar in some things. So in that regard, yes, Paulina, you have quite a challenge. There's a lot of literature, though, specific for place branding that would help you. And I don't know if I found a lot of challenges, and sometimes you just need, you feel insecure because you know a lot of the, you know the concept very well, or it is very clear when you talk about a commercial brand, but applying it to a city or a country where you have citizens, which is the reality is much more complex, you know that there will be some weaknesses that you cannot transfer 100% the concepts, but you need to find specific literature from it. So in your case, Paulina, some learnings from tourism, for example, which I know place branding is more complicated, but from tourism, you can, there's already some progress that can serve you to make progress, make further progress in the domain of place branding. And yeah, it's you need to keep working on contrasting general literature about those concepts that you said, like brand image, etc., together with specific literature on country brands, also coming from geography, anthropology, and other fields that would complement, that would bring these concepts from branding to the place branding domain. So I apologize that I don't have a solution, but I hope I kind of encouraged you. Okay, let me go down. Any other questions? So I see Haler. What do you think is the relationship between seasons, cultural identity, and city brands? That goes beyond that research, but it is actually crucial. So one thing that was linked to what was you telling about Paulina, but it's really linked to that, is that what you're saying, Haler, is that of course when we talk about branding, we have a brand manager that decides how the brand would be and how this brand will be. So we have this, I know the competitive context, so I will emphasize on this and that aspects would give me a competitive advantage, or that would make myself very differentiated from the competitors. So that works on the commercial area, let's say. But it's proven that on place branding, it doesn't work. And it's because there's no manager who owns the brand. The citizens own the brand. Tourists also transform the brand. The companies or the business dynamics also transform that brand. So there's no single management who can actually impose how the brand is or should be. So in that case, now the current trend on place branding is actually addressing branding issues, but from a bottom-up approach. That means that from what you said, the citizens' cultural identity, investigate that, ask them what they think they are and what they think their city or their country is, and from those insights, try to build up a brand that will be sustainable, because it will actually represent, in that case, the citizens, the different companies, etc. So that is really important when working with place branding, because to understand this bottom-up approach, that the different parts and stakeholders within these place brands is actually the start point. Their opinions and what they believe and their cultural identity, as Taylor said, are the starting point of the brand. And if you try to do it differently, it won't be sustainable, because the strength of the citizenship claiming their identity is way bigger than the amount of money that you can invest on promoting the image that you ideally want. Okay, so it is actually needed. Otherwise, you may have a beautiful advertising campaign which may attract some tourists, but when the tourists come to the place, the reality won't match what I promoted outside. So it's actually critical for place branding to apply this bottom-up approach. What else do we see here? I see that Nivea, you have your hand is raised.
Yes, yes, thank you. I just have one question, Sarah. When you are writing a paper like that, for example, when you're researching like this, what would be the specific point that allows you to name your research as a benchmark study? Would be because you went through all these comparisons among all the categories from other authors? What exactly would be, because like my branding research goes along the same lines, where I go around and I collect a lot of information from many different authors, and then I want to try to like consolidate one like a guideline. So what would be the tipping point to be calling a benchmark study?
Well, so in that case, very good question, Nivea. The benchmarks, so building this list of categories, doing the literature review in this thorough and systematic way was crucial to provide reliable measurement, let's say. But the benchmark part came from choosing the cities where I applied those categories, or where I applied the technique. So in order to test that this list of categories was useful and that I could actually see which ones were working more as competitiveness signs or as brand image differentiators, I applied my analysis to 12 cities. So here is where the term benchmark stands from, because it's only, I chose those cities because they were the leading cities. I chose a ranking, which was the MasterCard ranking of urban tourist destinations, which was the only ranking that specifically was highlighting urban or city destinations. And I assumed that all those that were successful, they must had to be doing something well. So I took all the cities that were in these rankings as a sign of role models or a sample that could be a benchmark, or that could be cases that at least would give us a good idea and a good feeling of how this research that I'm doing could be applied also to the whole universe. So that's where my benchmarks do.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Do you have any other question also about the publication? Maybe I stop sharing my screen because you've seen that. The publication process, challenges, or I don't know, David, if you have questions. Or I could address something else that you think may be interesting for the students.
Tell us a little about the process of the publication, if you want.
True. So it is when Anna was talking about this full year of publishing, it's pretty good average. When she talked about being patient, it's a real thing. You really need to take a deep breath before that. So maybe I can tell you the story that while I was trying to publish this paper, I also was on the way of publishing the main paper of my thesis. So to compare two processes, the main paper of my thesis, I sent it to the journal on May 2018. Yeah, it was a while ago. Okay. And that was where all my hope was, because in full force. And after I sent this paper, I kept working on this particular paper, and I only sent it after summer in September 2019. So this paper, while I was still the process of the first paper went to review. All the process that Anna explained was applied to that paper. Like, went to review, came back, months passed. Of course, summer was on the way, so nobody wants to work hard on the summer, so things got delayed. And it was a really slow process. I had to, you are nervous because you really want that paper. It's a lot of, you've invested a lot of time and effort, and reviewers can be really mean. I don't know if Anna remembers some, but I remember, I don't know if for these papers, but at some point I've had a review that said, you know nothing, or very similar, which is really hard to take. And I think it's good to share because with my colleagues, we share these things and it happens to everybody. Okay, so if that ever happens to you, don't fall down, don't keep your spirit up, because at the end, you may need to argue it better, explain it better to show that you actually knew what you were doing. Okay, so, but in the case of this paper, I sent it on September, and on January, it was already published online. So it was really fast. It was me, in this case, I was publishing it alone because it was a side, a spin-off kind of from my thesis. But I was shocked. There was a review process, so they gave me some revisions, but they were not major reviews. So I addressed them. And the most important part is that they were really fast in the process of reviewing. So I sent it. The next day, the status changed to send to review. Then in 3 weeks, they already returned the revision for my paper. The editor was fast on sending me the revisions. I was fast on replying to the reviewers. So the process was really well coordinated, and they really had a very efficient system, because I had criticism, I had to address things too, but every step followed the other one. So I submitted on September, and in January, end of January, mid-January, it was already on accepted. So it's really, really fast and uncommon. So on the process that this paper was published, the other one that was the main hope was sent. It was sent to review. It came back after 3 months. I had to reply to the review. It was stuck with the editor. So the editor had to check my review for 1 more month. After a month, the editor decided to send it again to the reviewers. They had to review it again. They return it. I don't remember exactly. Okay, but it's not that all the steps were there, but the first journal was really slow. Probably the editor had a lot of work. They were really saturated because it was a really a very relevant journal, that one. So I guess they had a lot of publications to consider. So the other paper, it was not accepted until February or March, I remember. So it was 8-9 months after I submitted for the first time. So it was a really long process. You sent the paper, David, on September. It was published last week. That was pretty fast too.
Kind of fast in this time. But another paper, it took 9 months for them to just reject it, editorial reject, after 9 months waiting.
No, that is painful. Because, yeah, it is 9 months that you lost because you could have sent it to a different journal. And that would have been...
Yeah, more productive. I had to wait for 9 months, and as you know, if you send it to someone, to some journal, then you must wait for them to answer. You cannot send it to other journals.
Mm-hmm. True. Right. It's true what Anna is saying also, that the reviews, they also, things, as we said, I mean, sometimes they are very harsh, but often they really strengthen the paper. They really make it stronger. Even if at the end they reject you, when you go to a different journal after that review, your paper will be stronger. Not only because you did things wrong, it's because you realize that some things you've done them and you didn't explain them as good enough because the reviewers didn't understand them. So you can address them, or sometimes you forgot to do something and you can do it later on. So even though it is hard, the process of reviewing it is also increases the quality of your paper. So any other questions or concerns that you may have?
So I think we don't have more questions. We are done. So thank you very much, Sarah. Gracias a todos. Thank you very much. See you in a month in the next working doctoral groups. Bye bye and take care. Thank you, Anna, too. And thank you, Ellie, for the recording.
You're welcome.
Ciao, ciao, guys.
Bye,
Enjoy
everybody.
your weekend.
Bye bye.
Enjoy and good Sant Jordi.
See you. Nice weekend.
Ciao, ciao. Parlem, Sara i Anna. Fins ara. Ciao, petons.